Hello, this is Cotton Soups and welcome back to another Lumen Legacy HTUC video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Akhalos. Ever since I reviewed this thing 2 years ago, Akhalos has cemented itself to be one of the strongest water-type sweepers, if not one of the strongest sweepers in the entire game. Akhalos has also made itself very versatile in what roles it can pick no matter its set, and it can support its team through damage, utility, and many other ways. Akhalos is quite a diverse mod, so we're going to be talking about everything that it can do in today's video. From counters and checks in teammates in order to know how you can actually really team build around Akhalos in teams, as well as knowing its roles and sets in order to know how to use Akhalos. Today's video is all about how to use and counter Akhalos. So in order to really know what Akhalos' role can be, we must look at its base stats, its abilities, and its typing. For the most part, Akhalos actually has quite a bit of good spread for its base stats. There's not a single bad thing about Akhalos, and I'd argue the only really bad thing besides its range attack is its speed tier. Its speed tier of 84 is still quite good, and it can outspeed the likes of Magmadiers, Boroks, and Valkyries just base speed wise. However, the main offensive firepower that Akhalos will be getting from is its melee attack of 120. This allows Akhalos to have some pretty good damage output even when you are not using it offensively. Just the base damage of it is pretty decent. And its energy of 94 allows Akhalos to use more moves than most Lumians in the game, as it reaches past the benchmark of 250, which is a very good benchmark to have in this game for energy. Besides this, its bulk is also pretty good. It has a very good HP stat of 116, and it has decent defenses of 97 and 91. This makes Akhalos pretty bulky even if you're not trying to invest into it, and when you take into consideration its defensive typing, you can really see the utility that Akhalos has. For example, its defensive typing and its bulk allows it to wall stuff like Magmadier when it has a specific ability that I'll be talking about later. Stuff like Wintrix, no matter if they are glide or they're wise. And you can also do pretty well against a lot of range attacking sweepers that normally don't do a lot of damage in base form. Stuff like Celestine you can swap in on. It's just very good for Akhalos, although it still has its downsides and it has a pretty plentiful arsenal of weaknesses it has to watch out for. Plant, electric, toxic, and brawler types are a lot in this metagame. When you think of plant types, you really think of the likes of Baneki, Tatep, and Nevermare on offensive teams. Lashent can still run Timber Thrash. Gastrook with Floroblast. There's just plant type coverage that you have to watch out for, although it's not really that much. The main thing you want to look out for are brawler types, mainly Tateb and Your Soul carrying the brawler type tier, along with Baneki being banned from some tournaments and of course being a threat in ranked. And as for electric and toxic types, not really too much, but you can think of the likes of Halvantic, Snagoop, Gabademic, Rancidor, Zulong, Metatoad. Yeah, it has a lot of weaknesses that it can watch out for, but it has the decent enough matchups that I'll be going over later in order to make its defensive typing worthwhile. And of course, speaking of abilities, the ability that I was going to mention when talking about walling Magmadier is Aqua Body. This makes it so Aqua Body will give Akhalos a regular resistance to fire type moves, and it also means that it cannot be burnt. This is a very good ability to have, especially on a melee attacker, because burnt status effects makes your melee attacking prowess cut in half. So Akhalos being immune to that is very good for RNG sakes, and can even swap in on the likes of Raging Flame, Lava Fiend if people choose to run that. And its secret ability, Aggressive, although while it doesn't have the defensive power that Aqua Body has, it arguably has the highest sweeping potential in terms of killing Lumians. You gain a +1 stage of melee attack when killing a Lumian, which means if you're running this ability, more oftentimes than not, you don't really need to set up too much in order to actually sweep because you have Aggressive here. Although I'll be going over which ability is better in the set section. All you really need to know is that Akhalos is very versatile. It has a decent base damage and speed. However, I will say this, it does need to get a few boosts going, because around because it doesn't have damage boosting abilities like Lumion in its damage tier, such as Borok with Boast, Valkyrie with Awakening, Magmadier with its frickin' Pyro Pro. It does need a few boosts to get up there, or shells if you want to be weird. And its bulk wall specific Lumions, like I said, and it becomes a pretty good generalist. Akhalos, no matter the set, can take hits very well no matter if they are neutral or resisted, and like I said, it has the sweep potential when it is paired with the Drudge, which will be the set that I will be talking about. So even though Akhalos does have the utility, the defense, and the typing and matchups to go defensive sets, I particularly think that Drudge works the best on Akhalos as it provides as much offensive pressure as possible while also being pretty bulky in terms of taking range or melee hits. The ability of choice here will be Aqua Body. I will say this, Aqua Body helps you in a lot of beneficial matchups. Magmadier, Lantorch, Lava Fiend, although you have to watch out for Flare on Lantorch. You can also swap in on Boiling Presses now from Nova Diaz if I recall, although I don't think you do actually. You still get hit either neutral or 2 times effective. You can swap in on Ice Hammers, Glaciadia Frost Beams, Wintrixes. Making sure that you get an extra resistance is just better, and it also synergizes very well with another item that I'll be talking about. And of course, Aggressive is another choice because we are running a sweeper set. It doesn't make sense to not mention Aggressive when it's clear that it's going to be an ability that you can increase your damage further. However, for most people experiences, Aggressive seems to tend to be overkill because you're already going to be what, +2 or +3 whenever you want to secure a sweep. Aggressive at that point just makes it pretty useless. And the personality of choice here, Brawny or Nimble can be ran. In my opinion, Nimble helps a lot better in the early game when Akhalos isn't setting up, it's trying to outspeed the Lumions in its speed tier like Magmadier. So Nimble can be good for that use case. However, when you're using Akhalos like a traditional sweeper and not trying to use it as like a defensive mon that can check offensive Lumions, then Brawny will be better because once you're at +2 or 3, you pretty much outspeed everything in the game and you won't really need that sort of nimble personality to fall back on. And as for its moveset, Wavebreaker and Ice Hammer are going to be your 2 best stab move options. Of course, you're running Drudge, and then your third move option can be Gnarly Gash or Rogue Assault. Gnarly Gash and Rogue Assault are 2 moves that can hit different things. You can hit metal types with Rogue Assault now. The main offenders of this is Celesting, Protagon, and you can also hit some other Lumions, but Gnarly Gash, in my opinion, is better. We are in a very Luminami heavy meta, and having Gnarly Gash to at least pop the Shade Pearl in ranked will be able to help Akhalos break through Luminami better. Of course, its teammates will help you with that as well. So in my opinion, Gnarly Gash is better, although Rogue Assault does have its use cases. Anyways, the item of choice. Now, there are only 2 items that you can really run, and that is the Rageful Plushie and the Bolt Pearl. Rageful Plushie, in my opinion, is just so much better because you are very bulky and you have weaknesses you can take advantage of. And when you think of Lumions that can hit you super effectively, 9 times out of 10 you can hit them super effective back. Electric types, you can hit them with Wavebreaker. It's just very good item. Although you could run Volt Pearl. Volt Pearl can allow you to win certain matchups against certain unelectric types or electric type coverages. Whether would this be something like a Protagon and then you can hit this with a Gnarly Gash, Halvantic with its Thunder Crash, and then you can hit this super effectively with your Wavebreaker. You have to take into account that Volt Pearl still has its use cases, although in general, I'd say Rachel Plushie is the preferred item. As for your TPs, because your energy stat doesn't really have a lot of good benchmarks it can reach without heavy investment, you want to invest for energy. Besides this, everything else is simple. 56 range defense will allow you to have 1 more range defense than your melee defense, so you can now you can now give Protagon a melee attack boost. And then speed tier of 200 and melee attack of 200 will make sure that you can have as much speed as possible while hitting as hard as possible. And of course, the 40 HP are the leftovers. Alright, so now onto the counters and checks section. Although it did seem like I was glazing Akhalos to infinity because of its very likable defensive and offensive traits, it still has some walls and checks. There are 3 common Lumians in this meta that Akhalos still has to watch out for. In ranked, Yursnak is one of the most common pivoters and stops to Akhalos. Even though it does proc Akhalos' Rageful plushie, Akhalos simply can't win against a Yursnak that has Pep Jab, Heartbreak, whatever. It's really hard for Akhalos to beat Yursnak, although correct me if I'm wrong on that. Other options would be Obsidian. Akhalos can win against Obsidian if it body crashes first and it is chipped. And at that point, Akhalos can just 2-KO with Ice Hammer. So you will have to make sure you will have to watch out for that. Although there's very low use cases where that actually can happen. And then the final one that I will be mentioning is Bar Blast. Bar Blast here is very good as Bar Blast resists Ice Hammer and Wave Wrecker. It resists Rogue Assault if Akhalos are running that, although it's mainly Gnarly Gash. And then it can hit it super effective back with Toxiblast. Not to mention it has the bulk to make sure to the point where Rageful plushie won't even become a factor anymore. There are other walls to this, but I just didn't want to mention them because these 3 in my opinion are the best meta-defining Lumians, although not meta-defining I should say, these are the most common meta Lumians you'd really find when you're using an Akhalos. Anyways, we also have offensive checks. Now, if an Akhalos is at +1 or 2, the only point you can really try and do and revenge killing it are boots users. Totab is one of the best boots users right now. Arceros also works here. I did not put Halvantic, but Halvantic also is fine. And then Zulong or Rancidor are also good because they can't hit you for super effective. And then Zulong of course has Thunder Strike. And then Rancidor has Muck Blast for that specific use case. Alright, so offensive cores for Akhalos. Admittedly, Akhalos is pretty easy to really build around because there's not a lot of answers, and for those defensive answers, there's a lot of overlap with wall breakers that you can really choose from. But I'm just gonna give you my thoughts and what I would pair it up with personally. So, when you really think of Akhalos, you'd think of bulky offensive Lumians that can really complement it through their defensive typings so they can fill in Akhalos' weaknesses, and then you can think of matchups. I think Nemesis and a random Earth type, preferably a melee one like Borok or Tyrex, fits this niche perfectly. When you think of Akhalos' weaknesses, Tyrex got that electric and toxic weakness covered, while Nemesis here got that brawler weakness covered. Also, Nemesis does very well against the likes of Yursnak, Obsidian, and Bar Blast. It just flat out walls them to full eternity, which is very good. And then when you consider something like Tyrex or Akhalos, which can deal with it, the Plasmoth that walls Nemesis, there's really nothing a lot that walls Nemesis, then you can really pair these guys up together and they do very well. Nemesis and a random Earth already does well, or air and earth types pair well with each other, so when you put in Akhalos, that is a nice bridge between them that can take advantage of both strengths. That's the greatest part about it. And then another one is Akhalos and electric type, mainly range electrics like Zulong or Metatoad, as when you think of their answers, stuff like, at least for Zulong, you think of Soulburst, Gastroke, Pyrolin, Benelin, and Plasmoth to an extent. Akhalos can all deal with those pretty well, and the case is even further for something like Metatoad, because Metatoad is checked by Tyrex, it's checked by Lashent. Akhalos can deal with that with ease. One thing I will say though, when you're really up against like something like Plasmoth for these electric types, you want to pivot into something that's faster than Plasmoth, because Plasmoths could run Zip Zap depending if the Plasmoth team is weak to Jet Wing, so you'll have to watch out for that when you're using Akhalos as the swap in. But other than that, really nothing else I can really talk about. Akhalos is just that good. So that's pretty much it for today's video. Let me know what you guys thought of the video, if you thought it was informational, and worth your time. Make sure you like and subscribe to see more of these videos in the future. I'll be doing more updates and more HTUCs on more Lumions, and of course I'll be doing more series on showcases, I'll be doing streams, more things like that. So my thoughts on Akhalos. Akhalos, I've never really used Akhalos as much as other Lumions, but I think Akhalos has the defensive and offensive traits that you would want from a sweeper in ranked. Akhalos has the bulk, it has the matchups, it has very strong sweeping tools, it has good coverage. There's really not a lot to really hate about Akhalos. The only things that I can really say on Akhalos is that it's walled by very common Lumions such as your snack, or it's checked by common Lumions like your snack, and I fear that that is very bad for Akhalos. Although Akhalos in the past has proved itself to be a Lumion that can overcome said diversities, and yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts. So yeah, make sure to like and subscribe. This is Stu signing off to remind you guys that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.